right, it is great to see all of you here at Global Forum. Paul, thank you for joining us virtually. Zach, thank you for being here as well. Congratulations are in store for both of you. Zach, you just wrapped a great season for Formula One at McLaren Racing. And then Paul, you were number 64 on our inaugural Fortune 500 Europe list. So congratulations to both. Zach, I have to start with you since the last race of the season was yesterday. How are you feeling about the season, and what happened between the first half of the season and the second half of the season that made it a nice, strong win?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Paul. Or good morning, I should say, I think, assuming you're in Europe. It's been a fantastic year for us. It's really a tale of two halves of the season. The start of the season was pretty bad. I'd even say terrible. Started off kind of the ninth quickest team. We'd not successfully developed our race car. I made some changes over the winter on leadership within the team, and the new leadership did a wonderful job in getting on top of identifying what our issues were, and more importantly, how to fix them. Our data had told us our car was not going to be very strong at the beginning of the year, and our data was correct. And then fortunately, our data told us our car was going to be pretty quick come Austria, right before the middle of the season, and we were the second quickest team in the second half of the year. And so what looked to be on course for a 8th, 9th place finish in the championship at the start of the year ended up being a very strong 4th, and finished this last weekend in Abu Dhabi with a pretty strong result, and team with the second most amount of podiums, nine podiums, a couple poles. So a fantastic end to the season, and already excited for 2024.
Yeah, amazing. Well, way to go on that turnaround, and I want to ask you all about the data and how you use it to signal change and winning in the end. But first, Paul, I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit more about why you're both here on stage today, because a drug maker and a race car CEO does not seem like a match naturally. However, you guys have an innovative partnership, as Jeff discussed, to speed up manufacturing. So could you discuss the partnership and the results? Why is it significant?
Well, firstly, thank you, and good afternoon to everybody that's there. Secondly, Zach, not had a chance to message you to say strong end to the season, and congrats to all the team. It's an absolute privilege to be working with you and everybody back at the McLaren Technology Center. I ran into Zach in Davos a few years back, and we were chatting about, amongst other things, sustainability and our commitment to the environment. And we started talking about some of the technical issues we faced in healthcare and developing new and innovative medicines, some of the challenges that they overcome routinely. And I'll be frank, I got a little bit inspired about entering a technical partnership with McLaren to try and help us raise our game. We're a highly technical, highly specialized industry doing very important, heavily regulated work, and so are they. And so Zach and I sort of plotted a long-range way to try and build a collaboration to raise our game and to, if you like, bring Sanofi back to the top, launching 25 new medicines over the next half decade, and where Zach will be running for world championships right ahead of us, we're running to be one of the most important innovation-led companies on the planet. And we didn't want our name on a car. I know that's important, but we really wanted help. We really wanted to work with the best of the best. We wanted to have people who would come into our manufacturing sites with credibility, with real engineering expertise, real understanding of data, and closing the delta to make you more effective. And they did just that, and even started this collaboration during the pandemic. We managed to raise, in 10 of our most important manufacturing sites worldwide, our productivity by 8%, wow. Almost entirely attributed to our partnership with McLaren. And that is a significant output of medicines leaving our manufacturing lines to the highest possible standards, because of the inspired and incredibly impressive work led by McLaren. It's an absolute pleasure, and we have the proof now that it works, and it works really well.
8%, Zach, good job. Not bad, guys, that's great. And just so people know the size and scale of Sanofi, you guys manufacture 4.8 billion units of medicine or vaccines products annually. So that's the kind of scale we're talking about, and ramping that up, that's significant. So Zach, first off, how many people have, F1, you're a fan of F1, maybe you've even seen Drive to Survive on Netflix. Can I just get a show of hands, F1 fans here? Okay. Oh, look at this. You don't have to win a ton of people over. We've got some fans. So you may know a bit about the company and how it works, but give me a little bit of the size and scale of McLaren Racing. There's about 800 people who work for it. How many engineers and data analysts? It's not just the driver. It's not just the car.
No, the racing teams are a lot larger than people would maybe think. For 2 race cars traveling the world, we're actually about 1,200 people in total. About 800 of those are on the racing team, and when you break those down, you have about 350 in manufacturing, about 250 in design, concepts, and then the balance would be around operations and data. And we have data scientists around every piece of our race cars. So some interesting data points. We have 300 sensors on our race car. We pull down 1.5 terabytes of data a weekend, and I once asked someone, give me, what does that mean? And for those that do know, they'll know what that means. For those that don't, that's about 10 million documents. That's about 400 movies.
Wow.
Is what we're capturing every weekend. And we then work with our data partners. It's one thing to get a lot of data, but then to be able to, some data we have long lead time on, other data requires us making split-second decisions. So we run 50 million simulations over a race weekend because we will often literally have to make split-second decisions, and so we have to rely on data. The good old-fashioned motorsports, you used to have racer instinct because you didn't have the amount of data we have today.
When you were driving.
Back when I was driving, and now we rely on it. It's data first. Ultimately, people need to make decisions, understand what data to look at, but then we have technology partners that help us cipher through the important data, because you can end up getting lost in data, but it's a very important part, and without it, we couldn't be making decisions on race strategy, we couldn't be making decisions on design and upgrade of our race cars, so it's definitely a data-first environment for us.
And has AI infiltrated and helped you make sense of all of the boatloads of data you're getting every weekend?
We're getting there. I think like everyone, everyone is understanding how it applies to their business. I think it definitely is starting to play an important role for us, both on the car development side, manufacturing, but also with fan engagement, because at the end of the day, it all starts with our fan base. That's why our partners and the media and countries want to host races. So we have a lot of engagement, and you can use AI quite productively in that manner. And that's something that, again, when you look at the various partners that we have in our racing team, we have those that help us work with our fans, and then those that help us run our business more efficiently, help us produce faster race cars, protect our business, with what's going on these days with bad actors around the world. Protecting our IP and our data is very important. So cybersecurity is something that is always top of our list.
Yeah, on the plane over, I flew with Darktrace, who helps you with cybersecurity, and
Quite a bit.
we were talking about that.
Quite a bit.
Now, Paul, every healthcare CEO I've talked to says this is the golden age. It's so exciting what's happening in the field. AI and data are changing it all. We can produce more drugs than ever before. They can be more targeted than ever before. How is AI and data transforming your business?
Well, I think we've declared quite early that outside of tech, we anticipate being the first AI at scale healthcare company. We break it down into a couple of areas critically. Expert AI, we call it, which is really structural biology, heavily intellectually the property protected, doing things very bespoke, supercomputing to design new medicines, new targets, to try and drug undruggable diseases, and to do it at scale and speed with a higher probability of success. And we're really starting to have success with that. And then on the second part, it's what we call snackable AI, which is how do we enable our 90,000+ people get better decision intelligence, getting nudged, if you like, by AI to make a better decision every day. And we're doing that right now. For most people, they may not understand that, but imagine if you're watching Netflix, you enjoy a TV show, and then Netflix recommends a show you might want to watch next, and you enjoy it. And people are always surprised by that. Well, that's, of course, algorithmic calculation. And we're doing the same every day to help people understand real time with Reels, a little bit like Instagram, how to make a better decision today that can get a medicine to patients faster, develop one faster, do it more efficiently. And, we're proud to say we have over 23,000 people in the company have access to AI on a daily basis, about 10,000 using it every single day. And we think it gives us an advantage longer term. And it's very important that we become very efficient. And one of the magical things about working with McLaren is how data-driven they are, how they make these critical decisions, and how often they make a decision in a split second. And, that is great learning for us. And Zak may have a view on it, but we took our senior leaders to McLaren to see and listen to how people operate in a time-sensitive environment to make critical decisions dispassionately, and then how they provide each other feedback afterwards. And, it's been quite incredible, the cultural impact, using data objectively, trusting each other, debriefing, and going all in on AI. And thanks again to McLaren for enabling that.
So part of what you all do together is manufacturing and efficiencies. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but a lot goes into making an F1 car. I mean, there's like 80,000 parts, and 90% of the car changes over the course of a race season. Now there are a cost cap, which prohibits you from just trying a bunch of things and failing, so you have to be hyper efficient. Zak, I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how you have made the process hyper efficient and low waste given the cost cap, and just how often these things need to change over.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Before our cost cap era, which started a few years ago, you could deploy all the resources you had to try and get to the solution as quickly as possible. Now with a cost cap, we're limited on what we can spend, so we need to make sure whatever we're spending has maximum impact. So it's our technology tools, our data, so you start in design, then you go into CAD, and then you go into simulation, then you go into the wind tunnel, then you put it on the simulator, then you put it on the race car, but sometimes you're going back and forth, and so your correlation as it goes down through the development chain has to be spot on. So we have about a 96-97% correlation rate. So if we try something and it says it works and it goes to the next phase, it's highly likely it will continue to work. So that's critically important. As you mentioned, our pace of development, if you take the car that won at the first race of the year and you didn't touch it, it would be last by the end of the year. So we're in a sport that literally, if you're standing still, you're going backwards because of the pace of development. And it's interesting, the mindset of a racing team is constant incremental improvement. They're not big improvements. We talk about milliseconds when it comes to improvements. So that all adds up to be a significant amount of lap time. And so you need to have the whole organization, and everyone is broken down by their area of expertise, and you need to give them total trust of who the subject matter expertise is, and then it passes up through the communication chain to ultimately make the various decisions you make over a race weekend and the development of a race car. We spend, which in Paul's world is not a lot of R&D money, but for us, we spend about $60 million just developing the race car. That's before we've actually manufactured anything. And then we spend a few $100 million on racing around the world. We have quite a bit of exquisite materials, and ultimately how we came about working with the Sanofis and the Unilevers and countries is we knew our technologies were applicable in other businesses. And so ultimately we have a business that's called Accelerator, where we work with some of our partners on deploying our technology, our know-how. So we've had everything from materials in prosthetics, because we know lightweighting, we know shock absorption. We've had information on the Mars lander. We work with Sanofi through big data and operational excellence. We do some aerodynamic work with Unilever around their ice cream factories. So areas that you would not think a Formula One team would somehow be involved in the pharmaceutical or the consumer goods business. And then that for us all falls under the sustainability umbrella of how can we take our knowledge and know-how and share that leading edge technology to make the world a better place. And a good example of that is when COVID hit and the UK ran out of ventilators, a handful of Formula One teams and a few other industries came together, and we designed and manufactured 10 years worth of ventilators in 10 weeks. And so I always used to walk around the shop floor saying, we're here to entertain people, we're not saving lives. And I'm actually now proud to say, I would think between the work that we've done with the UK government or the work that we've done with Sanofi, that we actually have hopefully helped contribute to saving lives and making the world a better place, not just a more entertaining place.
Amazing. So Paul, with the high volume that you're doing, Zak's over here making cars that maybe go for 2,000 miles. You need a little bit more longevity to what you're doing for your drugs. What have you been imparting on Zak over here? What's your manufacturing process, and how do you make it hyper efficient?
Well, so just to close off the loop, we spend about 7 billion euros a year on research and development, and it'll increase next year to take advantage of our incredible pipeline. We work incredibly hard to bring breakthrough medicines through, particularly as 90+% of our pipeline are medicines that are first in class, meaning there is no drug to treat that disease with that weight. And so we're very proud of all of that. What have I imparted on Zak? Probably very little, to be honest, because he is, at the top of his game. It's why we chose to work with McLaren in the first place. But I think, and hopefully I'm okay saying this, I think the teams have worked so well together. There's been so many opportunities. You think about it, it's so important. We have more than 25,000 people in manufacturing. And when McLaren pitch up and are helping you understand how you can use data better to be more effective. I'll give you an example. I was in Brazil a few months back. I'm at one of our manufacturing lines about an hour out of Sao Paulo, and we've got a wonderfully high-producing site. And we have an entire line, actually, that's run by people who have a hearing disability, and they're only signing. And they're proud to show me that over the time since we've been partnering with McLaren, they've gone from just trying to do better than they did, say, the day before or the week before, to looking at 30 or 40 variables on large screens at the end of the line real time to try and make in-the-moment decisions to improve their productivity. So effective have they been, by the way, that they set themselves a challenge to make that line the most efficient line in the whole of the country, which then allowed us to do our jobs even better and avoid spending multi-millions of dollars in building a second line, because they just were empowered as the expert, as Zak said in his own group, to make, I think what you call it, Zak, make the decision at the highest point of knowledge, I think you call it, which we learned from McLaren. And it's just taken us to another level. I don't want to miss a last point on that. When you're in Brazil, and this is one of the beauties of Formula One and McLaren, it's a worldwide phenomenon. So when you're in Brazil, there is a love for the sport that goes back perhaps beyond Senna and everything else that is deeply ingrained. And we took the ladies, because they were ladies from this manufacturing line, with Zak's help. We took them to meet Lando Norris, one of the drivers at the Brazilian Grand Prix, to thank them properly for their work. And it was a sort of intangible and emotional benefit culturally that they told me they will never forget. So we get technical, we get some of the glamour, I guess, sprinkled on top. We get great camaraderie, and it's been a real privilege, because Sanofi's moving at speed. And the real question is, will Zak win a world championship before Sanofi is one of the most important healthcare companies on the planet? And it's maybe a friendly bet, but I think we chose to work with each other because we're both on a similar journey of transformation.
So, Zak, when you joined McLaren in 2016, it was a bit of a turnaround job. I mean, one of the greatest racing companies of all time, one of the greatest car brands in existence, and yet you weren't winning. The morale kind of stunk, and you had a hard job, and you weren't profitable, but now you are. So things are looking up and up. How did you approach the turnaround job, and what are some of the most important moves you've made to change the DNA of the company?
People and leadership. I think you asked Paul there what kind of wisdom has he imparted on me, and I'll he didn't answer the question, but I will, because I think it ties into that question. You know, when I started, we have 1,200 people, and it was not, we weren't focused. Morale was not in a good place, and I've always been fascinated to see CEOs of very large companies that have tens of thousands of employees. I know how hard it was to kind of turn this little speedboat McLaren of 1,200 people around to turn a boat the size that Paul is the captain of, and get that going in the right direction is extremely difficult. So I've learned a lot by watching Paul operate with his leadership team when he's, you know, kind of led bringing this project to the table. How does he get the organizational buy-in and ultimately make impact with tens of thousands of people? So I've had to do that on a much smaller scale, and it was extremely difficult. I can't imagine what it's like, you know, times 10, times 20. And so I had to rebuild trust. There was a lot of guilty until proven innocent type of mindset on the shop floor.
For you or for the employees?
For the employees. You know, I came in new, so I felt comfortable, but there had been about 4 or 5 different leaders running the Formula One team in the last 6-7 years, and that's, you know, whatever company you're running, if you have that much change at the top, then the team below, they don't know who to follow and what they're following and how long they're going to be following them for. So I knew I needed to bring stability. I knew I needed to bring trust and develop a vision and get everyone to buy into that vision, and that takes time. You can't just tell them to do that. They have to believe it. They have to start, as Paul has seeing the data and the results, because then people will believe it. You know, when we first walk into organizations, some people go, whoa, how's McLaren going to help us? And so you have people, and I think this is all walks of life, that, you know, completely buy in right away and see the vision. Those that are kind of maybe on the fence, and then those that, you know, kind of think it's a crazy idea. And those are the ones that you need to focus on. And then if you can kind of shift everyone up through the belief chain, then you can really start building a lot of momentum. So I feel like it took 2-3 years to really get the team rowing in the right direction. And then this year we were tested. I think I'm very proud of how poor our start of the year was, because
You're proud of it?
Well, in a way, I'm proud of how we responded, because I now think our momentum trajectory, you know, had we started here and finished here, then that would be kind of your trajectory line. But because we started here and we finished here, the momentum that we have going into the off season, the belief, the energy everyone has, I think is going to carry us forward to a more productive 2024. And then you can't do it alone. You know, I think my leadership team, I think, is the best in my business. You know, my CFO, my CMO, my head of partnerships, et cetera. And so getting all of us working together, and we have strong debates. We encourage challenging each other. I think any good organization, there's no point in having 10 people sitting around the table all agreeing with me. I kind of want to get some different opinions, perspectives, make a decision, and then it's important that whatever decision's made, all 10 of you are rowing the same direction. But having healthy debate before then, I think, builds trust. And I'll go into meetings because I'll want to kind of put something on the table to discuss. I'll come into meetings with conviction, and I'll come out of the meeting doing 180 if I'm convinced otherwise. And I'm just trying to kind of get the ball rolling. So I think that's what good leaders should do: surround themselves with great people and get the input, drive the vision, and build trust.
Well, we look forward to continuing watching your momentum going into next season. Thank you both so much for joining us this afternoon, and thanks to all of you for listening.